Welcome everyone to Mail Fuzz TV. I am Peter, that is Tara, and we are going to talk about Star Trek Picard Season 3, Episode 4. It's called No-Win Scenario. So, full spoilers for the episode, as always. So Tara, you famously last week were thoroughly negative. You were livid, you were angry, you were basically just unhinged, quite frankly. So I'm curious to see if episode 4 fared any better for you.
I thought that this episode was terrific.
I'm not surprised you said that. For two reasons. One, the general buzz online was that this was better.
I saw some comments about that, yeah.
And secondly, I also do not think it was a bad episode. In fact, it's easily the best of the 4 episodes that we've had this season.
Probably the best of the series.
Probably the best of the series because the bar's been pretty low.
Which felt really good. It felt good.
Which is to
everything
say,
made sense.
Yeah.
It was nice.
Don't get me wrong, I don't think it's an amazing episode, but I'm not going to complain or critique that much and say it's not good. It feels amazing, I think, because the rest of the show has been shit. Right? Let me make that clear.
There's so much about this episode, though. If I close my eyes and I just imagine
a brighter set,
the crew of the D and them having the same dialogue and like the same decisions, I believe it. I believe that this fits in that world, in that universe, and it felt like a callback episode.
I pretty much agree. I do think there's a few things that sort of are lingering from the previous weeks that are still there that you have to kind of address. In fact, what part of your enjoyment of this episode, which I more or less did enjoy, and we'll get into all the things that were good about it, but you do have to just kind of sweep away everything you didn't like about the last 10 minutes of the last episode, and they kind of do it in the episode. In fact, Riker apologizes kind of and says you were right to Picard, which made no sense to me because Picard got his way. You did what Picard wanted, and that's what actually put you into this gravity sinkhole. So I don't understand that little bit of dialogue, but
See, I don't think so. Like I was on the side of Picard was right last week, and you were on the side of no, Picard's not acting in character. He's being ridiculous. But no, that's how they get out of this. Like Riker's just thinking like, I can't do anything too risky because I don't want to lose the crew. But like the crew is Starfleet, they know the risk. Like that's why they join. You have to take big risks and big swings. That's why the Enterprise D always made it out of sticky situations, and not all, of those Galaxy class ships did.
But Picard got what he wanted.
Sort of. It was still different though. Because I rewatched the episode, and I feel like Picard is trying to get Riker to not just like fire upon the ship, but like to do something riskier. And his solution was, okay, I'll just fire everything at them. It wasn't Picard who told them to fire. It was Riker who did. And it worked against them. And then he just blamed everything on Picard, which is why I was so mad at that, because I thought that's not a thing that Riker would do. He went blaming on somebody else. He's captain. He takes full responsibility for what happened, I was really upset with that episode. I'm glad he's like, I'm sorry, you were right in this episode.
Why wouldn't he just tell him to give him an idea then, though? Why keep prompting him to like vaguely come up with a solution by trying to be riskier?
Well, he says we need to fight.
I don't know. The last episode doesn't work for me. I still think last week was terrible. I'm not moving on that.
Yeah, last week was my least favorite episode for sure. But I still think that Riker was not in the right in that episode.
I don't think
he was not captaining in a way that Jean-Luc Picard would have taught him to. And it turns out in this episode there's a reason for it.
I don't necessarily disagree that Riker wasn't doing a great job last week, but I still think Picard was way more problematic last week, and I still stand by that. I didn't like Picard's characterization last week. And I still
we'll just disagree on that.
And I still feel that way. I still feel that way getting into this episode. And this episode feels like it just brushes it away like it never happened, which kind of I'm fine with because I don't want to deal with it. I don't want to dwell in it because at this point, like, you know, just do something more. Just do something better. That's basically how I feel. Yeah. So, a couple of little lingering things like that. But by and large, things in this episode made more sense. One of the things I said that I felt like this show wasn't like Next Gen was them actually trying to problem solve by using the things around them. This episode, they kind of did that. There's literally a scene where Picard, Beverly, Riker, also Jack, who obviously is not a Next Gen character, but they're all sort of sitting in the meeting room, kind of debating what to do, and it did kind of feel like a Next Gen scene. It felt like a Next Gen scene from, you know, the original show.
Beverly even like working things out on her own, and we get to see that. And it feels very Next Gen.
But the important thing of what I'm saying there, though, is when I say it feels like a Next Gen scene, the reason why that feels good is not because they're just recreating Next Gen and making a reference to Next Gen. It feels like a Next Gen scene in that the characters are actually functioning and reminding me what it felt like when they were solving problems in Next Gen. It's not a cheap callback to that original show. And I think this episode does a better job of navigating that than the show has done thus far. And when I say this show, I don't just mean this season, I mean this entire effing show this far. You know, the threat of the Changeling round around was handled relatively well, I thought. You know, the kind of heart to heart with Picard and Jack, like him trying to get to know his son a little bit, that worked way better than frankly it had any right to, because I have not given a shit about their connection up until this point, and it's felt really forced the way they've been.
I actually felt like emotional during those moments.
Yeah, because
it's working on me.
Up until this point, like one of the big problems with it is that they've sort of just like almost like sped Picard into this role where he's supposed to care. Like, you know, last week when we were talking about how Riker's like, oh, you're like, your son's on board, you have to go see how he is, like, as if it's like, but they don't have that connection yet. Like, he's found out he's got a son, sure, but he's still practically a stranger. He's not. It's not like you having your newborn that you were so attached to because you were there for the birth, and you're like, I have to protect my baby and all that. Like, Picard didn't go through that. So during this episode, they have these flashbacks to 5 years ago. They're really getting their use out of this bar set, because the flashbacks last time were also in this bar. But they're in.
I think it's Guinan's bar too. So it's from season 2.
It is 10 forward, because when I heard it at the start, I remembered thinking, oh yeah, this name doesn't. Like, okay, you've named it after the ship on the station in this part of the timeline, that's fine. But last season we learned that she was calling her bar 10 forward in the past before the Enterprise. When the whole point of it being called 10 forward is because that's where it was on. Never mind.
The 10th deck forward section.
Yeah. But we keep cutting to these flashbacks where he's getting pestered. Like, Picard's trying to have his lunch. And his fish is getting cold because all these like cadets in the academy keep coming up and asking him questions about his adventures, and he's rambling on. He can't help but tell them a yarn. He says he's not a story guy, and then proceeds to just tell them stories.
I love that it didn't take long. Like, they didn't have to twist his arm.
No, there was no prodding, and I was recognizing some of what he was saying. I've seen those episodes. And I was kind of like, okay, what is this building up to? Because it went back to them a second time, right? It's really thirds, right? So there's like 3 of them. There's the first one where it establishes it, the second one where he's telling more stories and he's trying to get back to his lunch, but they keep asking more. And then the third time we go, we get the kind of the what it's been building to, the reveal of it, right? And how it ties into the episode. Because up until that point, it wasn't really clear how it did tie into the episode. And it's... Yeah,
other than one of the stories that he tells, he also tells Jack later on.
Yeah.
And they use that sort of to help them escape this thing.
And the reveal is that Jack did go and reach out to him, and he kind of did it anonymously, where he just asked him a question in the bar. And the question specifically, because Picard keeps talking about how Starfleet's his family, how the crew of his ship's his family. And Jack asks, like, what about a real family? And Picard's response is what she thought was innocent enough at the time. And do you know what? To its credit, and this is why I think this worked, is because this actually sounded like Picard from The Next Generation saying this.
So much. Like there is some what is the emotion that I get? There's like a stoicism, but also I was gonna swear. Also like a fu kind of attitude. like there's an annoyance in the answer. Also, which I think was very Picard, and I think that's the part that really hurt Jack.
It resonated, and so it's the idea that Jack did go to see him, but he asked this question, and the answer.
I don't. Starfleet was the only family I ever needed.
Yeah, that was the answer. Yeah, sorry, I never mentioned that. And that obviously you can see why that wouldn't be turn Jack away. He'd think, oh, he doesn't want a son. He doesn't want a regular family, so I'm going to go. Mm-hmm. I think the reason why that works and why it resonates is because like I buy the Picard. If he found out he actually had a son, he would of course make the effort. He would of course try and adjust, and he would be a dad, and I don't for a second think he would actually be a dick about it if he actually found out he had a son. But I totally buy that asked by someone who, as far as he knows, is a stranger, he would give this response, because this is exactly how he spoke, not just in the original show. He spoke like this from episode 1 in the original show. In episode 1, he's like, get that boy off my bridge, I hate children.
Yeah, especially to kids.
That's episode 1 of Next Generation. So for the first time in this entire
to
show,
Beverly's son also.
Yeah, which that honestly thematically does kind of work actually. But for the first time in this entire show, it feels like it's actually using who Picard is to enhance the story that it's telling.
Yes, exactly. And it worked. Like, I didn't really care about the two of them. I did not want them to be a thing. But that moment might be enough for me to be like, okay, I like this now. I can't. If they're going to do it, they're going to do it. They have to do it right, and this moment felt right.
I really want, because this is going to sound like I'm trying to put a negative spin to this conversation, and I'm not. But I really want to emphasize, because it has failed so miserably of achieving this up until this point, this moment was like a celebratory. Like, there's trumpets going off. I'm like, did they just do something smart in the writing to like tie it back to like a character's like personality from the original show, where it's not just Picard getting angry and shouting and lots of like laser beams firing and like dumb twists? No, this wasn't some gotcha, oh, aren't we so smart because we had a mystery box twist. This was like, no, the twist here is that Picard just acted like Picard, and that gave Jack the impression that he wouldn't be interested, and like, that actually makes sense. It resonates.
Yeah, I think it works well also because Picard asked him out front, like, why didn't you seek me out? And Crusher says, well, I don't need that kind of family connection or something. Like, I don't need connections like that to people.
But he did.
And it's kind of reminds me of, when Picard was talking to Laris about legacy, and he says, I don't need to have a legacy. Like, that's not me. As far as like children,
I mean, even before the show, he kind of had that. Even in the original show, he had that attitude. He always like would deflect if anyone insinuated he needed to have like a family life and have a wife and have kids.
I can't believe they're getting Picard right in this season.
At least
for
once.
A show called Picard.
Like, this doesn't make me assume the rest of the episodes are going to be halfway decent. Like, they could just crash and burn after this.
Even when those cadets like showed up and started talking, it would have been so easy if this was season 2 or even season 1. That speech would have made no sense, and it would have been all like flourishy, flowery bullshit that doesn't mean anything. It's just an old man rambling about rainbows and unicorns in space. Like, it would have been awful. It would have been like, this Picard, why is he so nice to
I will say this, at least the new showrunner for season 3 seems to have at least watched Next Generation, which is the bare minimum.
Recently, too. Yeah.
Of getting the job.
The other thing I thought is that Picard said, what are you, like 23, 24? And Jack kind of like nods his head. And I'm like, okay, so Picard is like 100, right? I know he's a robot now, but I think they said in season 1 he was like 99 or something. Just before
you go into your theorizing and like maths here, that sounded a bit far. I mean, I know why they're saying that in the timeline, but it sounded far fetched because he does not look that age. And I looked him up; he's in his mid-30s.
He's had a hard life. He's had a hard life, all right.
But it was especially notable in the flashback at the end when he shows up, because technically here it's 5 years ago, so he's supposed to be like 18, 19 when he showed up in the bar.
Well, if you notice, he was wearing a ball cap, so to cover the forehead divots that he's got going on.
Which, don't get me
he
wrong,
really uses his forehead for emoting. But I mean, it works. He's got a very like World War One look to him.
I will say this though, right before the line about his age, they do actually open this scene with a nice little joke where he's like, let's talk about the elephant in the room, and you're expecting, okay, let's talk about the father-son relationship or whatever, and he just hits out with, when did your hair go? Like, he looks concerned. That was funny. That was a genuine do you know what that was? That was personality, because up until now Jack has been angry little British man, right? Who won't let anyone touch his mother. That's what his character's been up until now. So this was like, oh, he has a personality. Oh, maybe I could learn to like this character.
Yeah.
But yeah. What were you saying about the numbers? You were doing maths.
Yeah, I was just thinking, okay, so Picard's like 100. That means he boned Beverly successfully at like 76 years old ish. Not that they can't. But then, how old was Beverly then? Like, she wasn't that much younger than Patrick Stewart.
Why is he 100? Why do you think he's like 100?
Because he said so in like season 1. Because people just live longer than usual, and they're like, oh, and at the end of season 2, like you still are gonna live your full life as long as like another 20 years, which is as long as you would live without being in the body of a robot.
But hold on. It still might just be like 20 years since Nemesis, though. He wasn't 80 or 75 in Nemesis, was he?
Maybe. They I'm sure they said he was 100.
No, I think you're
on the verge of it.
I think you're misremembering, because I remember the scene that you're thinking of, and I think they're talking about when he might live to or something like that, rather than what age he actually is. I don't think he's supposed to be 100. But if you're right, you're right. But my impression of this entire timeline is that we're about 20 or so years after Nemesis. And I don't think they were trying to sell a Nemesis that he was like 75.
So Picard was 59 in TNG in season 1, even though Patrick Stewart was 47.
Okay, I didn't know that. What? 50? He was maybe pushing 60 at the start of TNG?
Yeah.
I just assumed he was Patrick Stewart's age.
But I swear they said he was like 100 in season 1 of Picard.
If he was 59 in season 1 of TNG, you might be right. I didn't know that. I thought he was just 45 or some shit. Alright, fair enough. This is just deep Star Trek lore that I didn't know, apparently.
By Nemesis, he was 75.
Okay. I mean, forgive me for not realizing this.
Begins in the year 2399. That would make him 94 years old at the beginning of Picard.
Okay.
But I think they even added a couple of years to it in the show.
Forgive me. I was using what human beings look like at certain ages as a barometer for this, okay?
Yeah. Yeah, I know. That's why I'm like, okay, so how old was Beverly? And she still was able to have Jack.
I'll put it this way. If people are living generally longer, then is it possible that women are also able to have kids for an extra 20 years versus...
Oh, sure. I would think it would involve more like, help.
Sure.
Like, rather than... Because I think we brought it up last time, but like you're considered geriatric pregnant if you're after the age of 35 for women, and it's harder to get pregnant. So, like, unless Beverly wanted to get pregnant and like maybe did some stuff to make sure that she was ready for it.
Do you think
her body's like, okay, we could do this?
This is just a random kind of related question to the topic, but do you think they used the transporter beams to like just for easy deliveries? Why do all the pushing? Just use the beam. Lock on. Get Scotty to do it.
That would be amazing. Unless there's some sort of benefit to the kid for being birthed out of the hoo-ha.
I mean, it's just like a C-section, right? Except without cutting.
Yeah, but I guess there are some things that like the baby gets from going through the tunnel.
Experience for death where you're going towards the white light.
It's some sort of like it actually affects the microbiome of the skin or something, and therefore inside. I don't know. There is something to it. I've read though, so but maybe it's all new science. This whole microbiome thing.
Yeah, but how do they replicate that for the C-sections then? Because that's the thing.
They don't.
Okay.
They can't. It's just perhaps the baby has like more chances of not building an immunity as quickly as the other baby.
Oh, okay.
No. It's the same with like breast milk. If you don't, if you give baby formula, they don't get also the kind of like microbiomes and things to help them fight off for early viruses and stuff.
Look at that, I'm learning that Picard's actually 97 and that going through the tunnel of life is got some benefits. You're just slightly more superhuman.
It's not entirely unrelated to this episode.
Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, we're talking Picard Jack still. I think them bonding, even just Picard cracking a little joke about, man, she must have really hated you to name me after her first husband. Because it wasn't until he pointed it out, I'm like, yeah, that would.
Yeah, that definitely crossed my mind before.
Yeah, that would make you feel a little bit like slighted. But Picard was friends with him though, so he's not like upset about it. He's like, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't have minded naming you after Jack, but yeah, he tells him the story of them getting trapped and. This is where Picard casually drops an F-bomb. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't think this one sounds like harsh because he's just kind of like talking about a rough time and kind of he's old and he's grumpy and but it's just this kind of thing where ever since they dropped an F-bomb in Discovery, I'm just like, this always feels out of place on Star Trek. Like you're trying to be edgy and I'm like, why? We don't need it. It doesn't add anything. I don't think.
Not really.
So, but.
I mean, if it's placed really well, then maybe. But like, there's one movie where I think it's Genesis where Data swears, and I always hated that moment too. So.
You mean Generations?
Yeah, I always say Genesis, don't I?
I was like, Star Trek Genesis.
I'm stuck in the Genesis project.
Star Trek Genesis. I don't remember Phil Collins doing a Star Trek movie.
There is a Star Trek Genesis. Okay, it's the reason Spock comes back to life.
Okay. All right, nerds. You schooled me. So, I think the Picard and Jack stuff works surprisingly well in this episode, especially given that I wasn't feeling any of it before this. And I think so much of it may just be in the awkward, clunky setup to get them all to this point, but there was a lot of things working better this episode than had done previously. And we can't talk about this scene of them in the holodeck 10 forward. Which I will just point out, they do a little explanation because they knew some nerds were going to like nitpick at it and say, wait, why is the holodeck got power?
This actually helps something out in the original show.
Oh really? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But they're like, oh, why is the holodeck got power? It's like, oh, no, it's on its own little auxiliary battery. Just basically, the idea is, from what I got from Picard said, is that if they're in a situation where everyone knows they're going to die, they can all go to the holodeck and pretend they're somewhere nice until they die. It's like a therapeutic thing, yes. Bleak, but therapeutic. So, anyways. But Shaw shows up at the end of this scene.
Can I say what this holodeck generator thing kind of fix real quick?
Oh, sure.
It's Voyager, because Voyager, the whole idea is the ship is in the Delta Quadrant. It's going to take them like 70 plus years to get home. They have very limited resources. They don't even use replicators unless they absolutely necessary. And they instead like just stop and pick up fruits and vegetables from local places.
Interesting.
And stuff like that, because they just want to conserve power. But holodeck's always on. And you have to think, look, how they can't use a replicator. But surely the holodeck is using a ton of energy. I don't know if I agree that
fixes it for me. I mean, I'm saying this having never seen the show, but surely even if it's on its own battery, surely that would eventually like see if they got to like season 5 and there was an episode where the holodeck shuts down because the batteries run out and then they never use it again. I'd applaud them. I'd be like, yeah, all right. That's great. That's perfect.
I like the idea that at least this is just for recreation. So as long as it lasts is how long we have it. And if it's, if it's 5 years or if it's a year, then whatever. That's how long it's there for. But we can't take the energy from the holodeck and use it towards something else.
But Tara, I'm going to ask a question, and I will not consider this a spoiler for an honest answer. Did they still use the holodeck up until the end of season 7 of Voyager?
Yes.
I knew it.
What difference does that make?
It just fulfills my point. They lasted the whole time. Lasted all 7 seasons.
Yep. Maybe it doesn't use as much power as we think. Maybe it only uses a lot of power if like the safety's off, because then it does have to generate real things.
Okay.
But if it's just the hollow projectors, then maybe it's not as much power as we think it is.
Okay. So yeah, Shaw shows up and he's all miserable, and we finally get some context for why Shaw really doesn't like Picard, and also why he's very off with Seven as well. It makes a lot of sense with kind of how he's treated her too. Basically, we find out that he was on a ship during Best of Both Worlds, back when Picard...
Wolf 359.
I remembered Wolf. I didn't remember the number, but yes, thank you.
You will.
But yes, he talks about like everyone dying, and basically the ship was going down and they only had like a pod for 10 people, and he was chosen, so he's got survivor's guilt, but he's given this big emotional speech as he's saying it all, and it's why he is so confrontational with Picard. Yeah, do you know what's funny is I really didn't like Shaw's introduction, although I liked him more in the preceding episodes because he at least had some character, he had some personality. I think for everything I didn't like about his introduction, I will say that it would be very easy to have him just be the obstacle for the main characters, but they did kind of go out their way to give him some kind of a personality, and now that they're backing it up with the actual backstory and having him kind of have these moments with Seven this episode where he's still himself. There's like a really funny moment actually where he's talking to Seven about how to catch the changeling, and he says something nice to her about how she's got leadership material and how she's great, and he doesn't actually mean it. He's just like, it sounds like something that you'd have a character in Star Trek write, and for a split second I thought that feels a bit forced for him to say that. And then he got to the end of it, and it was just like, see, something like that, which is clearly bullshit. Like, kind of like, that's how you catch a changeling.
That's how you would know I was a changeling if I said something like that.
And I thought, you know what, that was funny. That was actually almost making me think the writing was getting bad. And then it was like, no, it was smart, very good.
We swerved it away from the sappy.
So I appreciate that, and I think giving him this backstory, and then also having him then be good at what he came up doing, which is he was an engineer. He was the grease monkey, as he points out, before he became like a captain and rose through the ranks, and that's what
Engineers
he ends up doing.
on Star Trek are never greasy though.
It's an old but it's like,
yeah, I know it's an old saying. I was like, an engineer on a ship.
It's like it's like calling. I mean, even this is outdated now, but like, even when discs weren't floppy anymore, you still called them floppy disks. The terminology just sticks for whatever reason, because we're creatures of habit. But so like I thought Shaw was quite good this episode, and given that I didn't like him in his introduction, they've done a pretty decent 180 with me on that character, because he actually has layers. It feels like he's true to his character, like, in the same way that I felt like Picard was true to his character this episode, which for Picard is like, I feel like that should have been easy because you've got 7 seasons and whatnot of like material to draw from, and they struggled so much until this point. Shaw, and maybe this is a testament to the writers this season, well, I still think they've got some of the rushed kind of, and the awkward clunky exposition of the previous season still is kind of there, at least in those first few episodes. I think one of the things that I'm noticing from this episode, between Picard feeling correct, is that Shaw's a new character. And I was getting the same feeling with Shaw in this episode, where the things he was saying and the actions he was taking felt like they were feeling true to the character that they have presented me with over the last. Because this is the thing, it's very easy to come in and say, oh, this character we've had 7 seasons of and we've had multiple movies of, like we have such an ingrained idea in our heads of what that character is. But the same is true for just watching a movie. If a character in a third act of a story in a movie feels off versus the character they introduced in the first 2 acts, it's jarring and it feels like the writing doesn't quite work. So it makes sense that the same can be true for it feeling like it's succeeding, is that you feel like, oh, this is rewarding because it's actually giving me character decisions that make sense based on who they've introduced and set up. So I'm saying that between Shaw and Picard, I felt really much better this episode about characters and how they're being portrayed.
Yeah.
So
we got satisfying explanations for both.
Yeah. And I like the Picard, because Jack almost goes to stick up for Picard, which is a moment for him, because it's like, oh, he was about to defend his father, and this is someone he's kind of tried to like pretend he doesn't care about like every second.
Still
so
calls
far.
him Admiral in the P-way though.
True. But I do like the Picard is like, no, you know what? I'm not going to be offended by this. Like, he's right to be pissed. I get why this is this traumatic thing for him. I can't.
It was a pretty traumatic story too.
Yeah.
Like they were just a bunch of young, but also like new, lower on the chain of command, waiting for orders, and it was like 50 people and only 10 seats, and it was just some lieutenant who's just like, I'm in charge. You. I mean, it was a good story. It was really well told, and it was like, oh, damn, that is crazy. I mean, I would think that this would have come up at some point in like evaluations in Starfleet for captains, but we have had crazy captains on the show before, and Commodores. Commodore Decker, look what he did.
I mean, you say that, but I would also say this is a positive in the sense that like they might look at him as like he's a survivor of that battle. That makes him special. So. We want someone of that stature and a
that's true
leadership role.
He probably has like accommodations and stuff, and it just adds to his record.
Which only just makes him feel more guilty because he's like, I didn't do anything. I just got picked. Like a lieutenant just pointed at me and picked me, and who knows why. So
Admiral Locutus was blowing ships up one at a time.
Yeah, again, I think this is like a smart use of the history of the series. Like when I get annoyed at the as you call them, member berries, right? The cheap pops. That's why I call them. That's a wrestling term. It's like a cheap pops when you just like make a reference to something to get the crowd to cheer, right? The most common one is just like mentioning the town you're in, because when people hear the place they're from,
hello Cleveland.
Yeah. Right? Cheap pop. There's no weight to it. It's not that I think they should ignore everything. In fact, that would be equally unsatisfying. Like, the things that matter and are relevant to what the characters are going through should feel like they existed. They should feel like they happened. But that doesn't necessarily always mean actually calling them out by name. Like, you can, like, have it feel like the history is there without ever having to, explain it word for word, what they're referencing to or what they're thinking about or remembering. Sometimes going those extra steps, like, almost devalues it because you're speaking down to the audience. But not that I felt that here. I didn't. But that can happen, and I think using someone on the show who now is old enough to be a respected captain, but was at the right age during the original series to be this rookie in this battle and just barely survived and has survivor's guilt over it, makes a lot of interesting sense to me.
Plus, all the fans of the original shows, I mean, we love Cisco, and he also has resentment towards Picard for the exact same reason. His wife died on Wolf 359.
Which, by the way, we got a photo of Odo.
We did?
Yeah, when... it's this, I think it was Shaw was talking to Seven. He said, he was explaining what the Changeling rules are, and he's talking about the bucket. She has to go find the bucket. He hands her a file, and in the corner of the file was Odo's picture.
Oh, okay. I missed it. I guess I was looking at the bucket. Although he called it a pot, and then 709 made a cannabis joke, and I thought that was very strange. Like, pot is such a colloquial term that you could see it going away. Like, nobody really uses pot except for, our mothers or something like that and their age. So, I just don't expect that to be around.
Yeah, it's also very American, because none of my mothers would say that. Like, I've got multiple mothers, you know what I mean?
None of the mothers that you know.
Yes. So, yeah, actually, on that subject, I was thinking, just to back on the swearing, actually, is that, you know, in Star Trek 4, The Voyage Home, there's kind of a funny running gag where Spock has never heard colourful metaphors before, right? Mm-hmm. Which made it sound like swearing has kind of, like, faded away, because, like, things are more peaceful and people don't need to swear anymore. But
people don't get frustrated like that, yeah.
Yeah. Modern Trek, though, everyone's dropping these F-bombs.
Sheer effing hubris.
Yes. Yeah, that one was worse.
If I make a blog, that'll be the title.
So, anyway. Yeah, the Changeling thing, the Changeling doesn't end up being like a big character. If anything, I'm a little surprised they didn't play with the idea that it could be pretending to be one of the main characters. Obviously, it eventually showed up as LaForge, but, like, it was very obvious that she was the Changeling as soon as she walked in, because she's obviously on the bridge, like, piloting the ship. Like, this is clearly not her. But, you know, I did like Seven's little trick to, like, find out, just to confirm that she was the Changeling. Not because...
It was pretty bold that she just shot her in the chest, though.
Oh, sure. But the reason why I liked this, though, it wasn't like it was super smart in and of itself. It was the fact that it meant something for her and Shaw's relationship. Because we know that he's been making her use a human name because it makes him feel better, basically. You know, he says it makes the crew feel better, but it's about him, let's be honest. And she says, you know, what do you know, she basically makes her call her name, but she uses the human name, and she blasts her, and Shaw's like, how did you know? It's like, because she always calls me Seven, out of respect. And she really sort of puts a point on that, and Shaw doesn't give her like a big moment out of it. He holds it back. He just says, nicely done, and just slides back under his mechanics pit.
I just thought, like, that was a bold move, and risky. Sure, like, she always calls you Commander Seven, but maybe because the captain's there and he refers to her as Commander Hansen, she might be like, Commander Hansen.
That only further makes her point to Shaw, though, that, like, you know, she would expect her to say it in front of him, even, because respecting her is more important than playing to his petty little demands.
I guess. Still ballsy. She was right, of course, because she was written to be right. But
yeah,
I still would have gone with something else. Although it does make sense for the story arc that, you know, this thing that they're trying to build up the relationship between the two of them, so that they have a understanding.
Yeah, I can live
I get
with it. I can live with it.
I can live with it.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, no Raffi this episode.
Or
Chef's
Worf.
kiss. I mean, sure, we can give Worf back later, but, like, no Raffi.
Are you surprised that we're 4 episodes in and we still haven't seen Geordi or Brent Spiner?
Yeah. It does feel, I mean, obviously now that they're out of the nebula at the end and they're on their way back wherever, I presume that's where we're going to end up meeting, you know. I feel like Geordi must be soon. I feel like we're going to get... Laura will be saved for later. He's the more special, because...
Well, I was thinking, like, maybe Laura's the thing that they stole from the Daystrom Institute, since, you know, they wanted... They wanted data for a long time, and they worked on stuff like that. So maybe it's lore. Maybe that's how he comes back. Or, I mean, I did hear that somebody, a different character, was going to come back in this show like a while ago, related to the holodeck. Ringing a bell?
Oh yeah, I know this. Yes.
Okay, so I thought, well, maybe that's at the Daystrom Institute.
I read a whale theory that this entire show is taking place somewhere.
Oh, is this whole show just an elaborate Moriarty ruse?
Okay, since we're talking about Moriarty, right? I don't think it's even that spoilery, because they made the big announcement that Moriarty was going to come back.
I forgot about it, but
yeah. But obviously, we've not seen Moriarty yet. We're 4 out of 10 episodes, right? Moriarty's nowhere to be found yet, which makes me wonder, like, maybe it's just a fun cameo, maybe it's in the holodeck, whatever.
Maybe this is his Wrath of Khan.
But part of me was thinking, so, because I, as far as I know, I've gotten to the end of his story in the original show, because I've had the episode where they basically trick him into thinking that he's out free in the universe, but he's actually just in a fake universe because they can't actually put a hologram in the real world.
I don't remember him coming back any time after that, so yes.
Right.
I think they were like, oh, we'll get back to you one day when we figure it out, and then they don't.
I saw a theory.
This is Khan. This is just like Khan.
Oh, hold on. I saw a theory that this entire show is set in his fake world. This is not the real characters in the real world, which I don't think it's true, but it's kind of funny to think about. What if Moriarty's the villain, though? What if he's the one sending everyone after Picard because he's pissed that he got tricked and he somehow found a way to get...
And he figured it out, and he is smart enough to even outsmart Data.
What if he's in Lore? What if he's taking Lore's body? What if it's actually Moriarty who's in there?
I love it. Is that what was stolen from the Daystrom Institute?
It was stolen. He's an AI. He's only in computers. He's talking. He's making deals with villains to go steal Lore because he wants a body. So now he's in Lore, and now we have Moriarty in Lore's body, coming after Picard for tricking him.
Okay, I kind of love this, and that's why he wants Picard's son. I'll
praise it so much if this turns out to be the direction this is going in.
I love the idea that this is Moriarty's Wrath of Khan, because Wrath of Khan was also like, we're going to give you this planet, and then the Federation just forgot about them. And even when things went bad, they had no one to turn to for help, and he blames Kirk, right? At the end of that episode that you remember, where he goes off into this fake universe with his bride, they said, like, we're just going to, until we can figure out a way to get you out of here. This is, and we won't forget about you. And he never comes back. So they did forget about him. So he's just festering and making his big plan for revenge.
Yeah, they don't tell him that, obviously, because he thinks he's out in the world already. But yeah, they plan.
Yeah, but he's smart. He'll figure it out.
Yeah. That'll be the interesting thing is, if this is the case, if he is somehow out in the real world, he must have learned at some point he was tricked.
This would be so awesome.
I'm going to be disappointed now if that's not at least part of this is true.
Well, I mean, we know he's in it. It could just be like maybe he's like the Hannibal Lecter. They just go to him for help or something.
It could be that. They might just want his help to solve a mystery or something. But I think because they're still not, like, obviously we don't know who Plummer's working for and whatnot. I do feel like...
a changeling appears anyway.
Well, I'll come back to that. I'll come back to that statement. But because they've not revealed who she's working for yet, it does make sense that it's someone we know. It makes sense that it is a Lore, it is a Moriarty, it's someone that will mean something to us because they're hiding it. It's going to be a big deal when it's revealed.
And that's why they need Geordi.
On the Changeling thing, I don't necessarily know, I don't know if they did this in Deep Space Nine, right? But her cutting off her hand, right? And then it became like a sort of weird pizza-looking thing, right? That's the one thing I'm noticing. The effect for the Changelings in this, it looked more like water with Odo on Deep Space Nine, at least from what I've seen.
Yeah, that's always the thing that could have been updated, right? With it's just kind of golden goo. Yeah. That's very early special effects for television.
I didn't read necessarily that the person talking to her was also a changeling. I took it more that it maybe just like it's using her matter to like change into like a vague face, but this is not necessarily what the actual person or being looks like, because it's like this weird pizza face that forms.
Yeah, it's still a changeling though, because we saw the other changelings on the ship turn into this. It reminds me of like the blob in its like earlier form before it gets too big. It's just sort of a mass of like things that is consumed. So before it gets too red from all the blood.
Well, no, but the person talking to her might not be a changeling. We know she's a changeling because she cuts off her hand and it's like used to like make this call.
No, I don't think she's a changeling. I think that the hand is just a changeling. Like she's a human without a hand.
Okay, so you think she's just got like a changeling hand on her?
Yeah.
Okay, I just assumed she was a changeling.
Maybe it's going that way.
Because I thought that's what she was doing.
It would have two different minds. It would be two changelings at least then.
well, see, I don't know what they've introduced before, but the way I read the scene is that she's a changeling and she cuts off a part of herself and lets someone else take control of it to like call her, right? And that's the way this call system worked.
Wait,
well,
there's nothing like that in Deep Space Nine.
Wait. So are you telling me you think that this wasn't coming from somewhere else? You think this was just the hand came to life and talked to her?
Yes,
no,
I think she's being controlled by the changeling. Yes,
this was a call. This was someone else calling in using the changeling to like make their face and talk to her.
Okay.
That's the way I read it. I did not read. It never even crossed my mind that this was just a living thing that was also her hand. I took this as someone was.
Yeah, it's like a parasite.
I took this as someone is calling in, and in the same way that you would use like the electronics of a hologram to make like the person's face to talk to them, it was using the changeling matter to make a face, or as if it was molding it out of clay and talking to her.
No, I don't. There's nothing that I could think of that changelings in their history would be able to do that. Well, they have a great link, but they have to be like connected.
Yeah, but I think it's new though. Like that's what I'm saying. I think this is a new thing they're adding to their.
It's a new thing.
Yeah, maybe the thing she put, because she cut it off onto a specific little platform. Maybe that platform's also like part of the trick. Like, you know, that has to like put the call into her or whatever.
Okay, maybe.
But that, I mean, like, I could be completely wrong here, but this is entirely how I didn't even like. Regardless of anything else I'm saying, I'm convinced this was a call coming from somewhere else, and it wasn't just the hand talking to her. I took this as part of her matter that she cuts off, and that's why it hurts when she does it. She seems very nervous to talk to. Yeah. So there's definitely a big bad that she's working for.
If you have a changeling who could transform into anything, and you have someone missing a limb, why couldn't it be the missing limb?
I gotta be honest, this doesn't happen too often, but this is one of these moments where, and again, I acknowledge that you might be right and I might be wrong, but this is one of these moments where I come into a review and you hit me with a take that you obviously just assume this is the right and the correct way to read the scene, and I'm like, what are you talking about? How did you get that from it? That's how I feel right now. I don't get I understand the logic that you've explained it, like I get, but it's weird to me that your mind went in that route.
It would only work if there were. In my mind, it would only work if they were already two changelings like connected.
Well, what I'm thinking it's showing is that a changeling can cut off a part of themselves and then let it be controlled, because it's not like it formed a perfect shape. It looked kind of distorted and like the face was melting and whatever. So I think this was she's a changeling and she gave up a part of herself to be controlled for it, because it reformed back onto her hand afterwards. You know, it went back together. So I think that's what happened in the scene. And if you're right and the villain is literally just her hand that's its own entity, then you know what, Tara? I will give you a prize. I will give you a prize. I don't know what the prize is, but I'll give you something. Okay.
I'm not going to give you anything if you're right.
That's alright. These smug entitlements enough.
I know.
Oh, dear.
I don't understand. Like, it seems like I don't know. It just seems like it's right.
That was like a Shaw moment. I guess I'm relating to Shaw a little bit here.
Yeah.
I'm true to my asshole self.
Makes sense why you didn't like him. Could only be one.
Yeah. So, yeah, the big thing of the episode though is obviously everyone's slowly dying because the ship's got no power. They have no power to do anything. But Beverly throughout the episode is like keeping tabs on this like power surge that's happening coming from the center of the gravity well. And we see the ship light up every time it happens, and she's sort of timing it, she's counting down, and she eventually says it's like contractions. And as soon as she said that, I thought a Farpoint. I was like, you're saying this is a birth of some sort of big cosmic entity or whatever it is. That sounds like a Farpoint reference, and I don't know if it's meant to be the same species, but it's certainly like
it kind of looks like them, right?
It definitely made me think of them because it's big jellyfish basically. There's all these little jellyfish looking things.
I thought that was actually kind of a nice callback, a nice member berry. You know, I think it works really well in this to have a callback to the pilot episode of the show. one that a lot of fans will not revisit. Although I think it's quite good. I like the pilot episode.
I think this works in the sense that Star Trek in general can be a little guilty, at least from the episodic days. It can be a little bit guilty of never really bringing things back up again. And these modern shows can do it too much. But I like this in the sense that it, like, remembering this made them go, oh, wait a minute. If this is a birth...
They said Farpoint, and I did that, ooh, 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 ooh.
Yeah, but it's more than that.
Meme.
It's more than that, though, because it makes sense why they understand it and why they're willing to believe it, right? It makes sense that from just a logic perspective that they fundamentally understand that it could be a birth because they've encountered something familiar before, and so they go, oh, like Farpoint, and that makes sense because that's exactly, if you've seen the show, you've seen the original show, that's what you think as well. So yeah, and it becomes this thing where they're talking about the plan, and it made me think of a scene in Next Gen, and it was usually Data and Geordi who were the ones doing most of it, and they're not there, but it reminded me of them in the in the meeting room saying, and we can do this, and then we can try this, and maybe this will work. And sure enough, they think of a plan to like ride the surge of energy. It's almost like Back to the Future. They're connecting to the cable up to the clock tower to get the power to ride out.
I mean, I was thinking Generations again, but with the Nexus, riding the waves.
Yeah, but I'm a Back to the Future person, so that's what I thought.
Yeah, I'm a Star Trek nerd.
So they.
But I think it is the same species though, because that species also was able to emit so much energy that it just recreated like a city, and anything that people wanted, it can just create. Yeah. So it has its own like energy source that's very, very strong. So it makes sense that this birth would just be like enormous waves of energy. They
ride this wave out, and they do actually run into the Shrike, who have been forced to come in looking for them, even though Amanda Plummer didn't want to. And Riker's plan, and she said she had to dump the weapon. She had to dump the portal gun. Yeah, because it was too valuable to damage or something. She had to leave it outside, right? Or something like
that. It was too dangerous to bring it close to that energy source.
Oh, that's what it was? Okay.
She said it would be suicide, so they had to dump it. So no more portal gun.
Yeah. So Riker has an idea to use the tractor beam to grab an asteroid and just lob it at the ship, which I thought was a neat enough move. It was fun in the moment. I like
kind of a callback also to the way that she hits them.
Well, it's a bigger callback than that, because I saw on Twitter. I like this. There's a reference to a scene from don't ask me what episode, 'cause I don't remember. But there's a conversation in Next Gen where he's asking for like, phaser power or whatever, and he's been told that they can't have it, and he ends the scene by saying, well, can you go fetch us some nice rocks to throw at them or something like that. It says there's actually a scene in Next Gen where he says something like that, so it's actually kind of a cute callback to that. So he threw a rock at them.
Cute. I thought it was just he was using her trick on her. I
mean, no, it works with that as well, obviously. Like that's probably why it's fresh in his head, because that's what they did to him. But I mean, Riker's whole thing is that when they're all debating this and talking about it, and it's risky, and he's like, "Nah, we shouldn't. It's it's too dangerous." At this point, I did think, Riker, everyone's slowly suffocating to death. At this point, why not try something? Like, anything's better than nothing at this point. Just go for it.
I think he's just in a dark place because, of his depression and not able to write a message to Deanna.
Well, I like that part of the episode too, which is once they see all the jellyfish like being born, and it's all this, very pretty and colourful, and he calls Troy afterwards, and this is the first time we've seen her this season in present day, because obviously we saw her in the flashback, but this is the first time we've seen her in present day, and I think it actually kind of works from the perspective of if Riker says himself that he's disconnected from her and he's not been able to communicate, and that's why he actually left to go and work again, is because he Troy could sense that he wasn't feeling anything, and that was straining things, so he sort of escaped, and he's avoiding it, and he can't even record his message in case that he dies to so that she can hear something afterwards. He can't do it, and this birth is reminded him of the beauty of the universe, and there's magic out there, even if there's no life after death, even if there's nothing like that, because he doesn't really believe it. There is beauty out there. There is something. The universe is a wonderful place, and he finds his spark again a little bit.
Does this kind of retroactively make this scene where he has his pizza oven and is really happy with his family and loves his family and his daughter retroactively kind of sad because he's actually going through something really hard still.
Yeah. I mean, I think...
And that was just all like a show put on for Picard.
The weird thing about that is that obviously, like, this is a different showrunner. They had not written season 3 when they wrote that. I don't think they intended this at the time. But yeah, I suppose if you watch that again, I'll never watch season 1 and 2 of this show ever again. But if you did watch that again, you might have like a little bit of another reading on it because you have this context now.
Yeah, I'll probably watch it again one day.
You glutton for punishment. Star Trek fan? More like Star Trek masochist.
Maybe.
So yeah, but no, I look, there's so many things in this episode is that it's not over the top with action. There's not a lot of like quick cuts. It's a simple problem that feels like they're on a ticking time bomb, very classic Star Trek. They have to use what they know to figure it out, and they use past knowledge to inform the decisions they make now, as opposed to making it, it's like last episode, I think it was, or 2 episodes ago, when Picard had the conversation with Beverly, and it felt like everything they said was all made up history to justify the writing of what they were doing in the moment. This was the opposite, the good opposite of that, where everything they're bringing up is being used as true and being used to justify the actions they're taking. So it feels earned, and it feels like this makes sense, and I don't feel cheated as an audience member because you're not just making things up to justify the decisions you want the characters to make, even if they feel out of character to us. It's actually shockingly simple. It's complex to talk about, but it's shockingly simple when you really boil it down to the key problem.
How about that?
So... yeah, and then much like a lot of classic Next Gen, it ends with like, hey, isn't this kind of beautiful what we just did, or what we were just a part of? Like, it was all doom and gloom for a bit, but that was actually kind of wondrous. Like, that's very Next Gen.
And brought, if it really is the Farpoint creatures, and it kind of reminds them of like their days when they all met each other before the great big adventure happened.
The start of
course, it's going to reunite some kind of spark.
The start of their journey, it's yeah, and even, like I say, I was liking Jack this episode. I was liking Shaw this episode. Like Beverly was being smart in the way that she was in the old show. Like, things were just clicking better this episode, and I don't know if it's just a case of... but the hopeful assumption is that the rest of the season now is at least up to this standard, right? Which would be, if it stays at this level, I'll be delighted, because it's so much better than the misery.
This is the send-off that this cast deserves.
But it makes me wonder if the first 3 episodes were just as clunky as they are because they just had to like force all the pieces in place, which is still it's still a valid thing to critique, because better writing potentially could get around that and you could still figure out a way of doing it. But if it was just like forcing all the pieces in place so they could start hitting the story properly and feeling correct from this point on, then sure. Like, I don't think it makes any of her complaints in those first 3 episodes any less valid, because I think they all still were. But I
mean, I didn't mind the first 2 episodes. I thought episode 3 I just thought was a real stinker.
Although I will say this, the Changeling definitely heard young LaForge talk, because she used the word legend when talking about her father. And that's scene again.
I was sort of hoping that original LaForge was also a changeling. That's why she was acting like that. Trying to get Seven to mutiny. Yes, mutiny. Tear the ship apart.
Hey, you know what? If nothing else, Tara seems to be in a pretty good mood at the end of this review, which has not been the case recently. So something's clearly went right. If we could have a positive conversation. Like, I still had some nitpicks. There's still some leftover little lingering things from, just because they're there. Like, they have to be, because they've already done them. But for the most part, I actually enjoyed this episode. And I pray that it can maintain something similar to this level for the rest of the season.
Oh, great God of Star Trek. Please.
If it does, like, it would be the biggest turnaround that I have ever seen. That the last 7 episodes, hopefully, potentially,
this will be like that one good episode of the new Twilight Zone show.
Yeah, it had one good episode.
There's one. We got one.
But I mean, it would be so. How much of a weird feeling would it be though for a 3-season show for like the last 7 episodes to be quite good. And I suppose at least with this show, you can just tell people to skip the first 2 seasons. Like I don't think you really lose anything by skipping them.
No, unless for some reason Picard as a robot comes back into play.
I'll be surprised if it does. I'll on like a little sly reference here or there.
I mean, I'm sure Lore's going to say something about it.
Yeah, maybe Lore will have a wink, wink, nudge, nudge moment with it, or Picard will like bring it up to him to relate to him or something. But I don't think it's going to be like important for like a big plot beat or anything like that.
They're going to have to recast Moriarty, I think.
Why?
I don't know how old the actor is or was. He might be dead. I don't know.
I thought they said they got the actor back, but maybe I'm just misremembering that. I could be wrong.
Would he age inside the holodeck, though? I guess they would have to make him age in order to make him believe that he was there. And not on like
well, to be fair, if I'm right about him being inside Lore or inside a robot or computer or some kind, then it doesn't really matter. Does it?
Maybe just the voice?
Yeah, you wouldn't see him. So just get a good guy, someone who can mimic his voice, and Bob's your uncle.
Bob's your uncle.
Or
thanks, Jack.
And Fanny's your aunt, which I've never heard that one, which is really weird.
Well, it's the future, you know.
Yeah, but that's especially weird because it sounds like an old English phrase, but that's weird because
it's vulgar.
But yeah, Fanny's a bit more vulgar in the UK than it is in the US.
I'm sure that was intentional.
Probably. He made a reference to a vagina on a Star Trek show. Look at him go.
But...
I mean, not really. He was using it as
a name,
there's
2 references to vaginas in this episode. There's a birth.
Oh, yeah. Well, there was also a lot of talk about Picard getting laid.
Yeah.
Which Jack was quite happy to like joke about and bring up.
Picard said, hey, they invited us.
Like, we're making first contact with 2 beautiful young ladies, okay?
I thought he talked about it in a very Picard way. I had the Horgon and they approached me. That's a Ryza joke.
I do like that Picard and Jack Crusher almost got killed because they were being sneaky to try and have sex. Not with each other, obviously. Like, it almost got them killed. Honestly...
Hey, it's a very powerful motivator for a young man.
Honestly, 2 20-year-olds, like, or specifically 2 20-year-old guys almost getting themselves killed because they might have been able to have sex is the most believable thing.
And Picard was
I've ever
very
heard.
reckless when he was young.
This was Picard with hair. He got a lot more sensible when the hair went.
Yeah.
I speak from experience. Okay. I grew so much more wise.
Uh-huh. That's why the hair goes, because the brain gets bigger. Pushes the follicles out.
Exactly. Yes, that's exactly what it is. All right. I'm sure we glossed over something at some point, but we've been speaking for over an hour, so I think we'll call it.
Let's call it.
We'll call it. But I can't believe I'm saying this. To be fair, the early reviewers who got the whole season did say it hit its stride at episode 4, or it picked up at episode 4. I didn't really believe them after last week's episode, but fair enough. It was better.
This seems to be the case so far. Yes.
Like, not perfect. Like, still little things you can nitpick, but the stuff is working in a satisfying way the majority of the episode, so the little nitpicks don't matter that much. Like, see when the core writing is not working, you start to hate everything that's not working. So all the little things bug you even more because it's another thing on top of the main thing. But because the main character decisions and relationships felt like they were making sense and paying off and not feeling forced or fake, the episode felt good overall. And it, the rising tide and all that nonsense,
Yes.
So, of course, Rafi will be back next week to ruin everything, but we'll see how that goes.
She's got Worf.
She's got Worf.
They're going on their cool mission. These last 2 episodes were directed by Frakes. He tends to be a lot more flourishy in this direction, so I think he really toned things down.
Which is the wise choice. I appreciate his restraint. I hope the next episode is called A Worf Among Us. No?
Oh, actually, I thought the episode title for this was pretty funny.
No One Scenario?
Yeah. because they've used Kobayashi Maru in like so many different forms. They can't do it again. So like no one scenario.
I did think that.
It made me laugh.
Honestly, the episode titles so far have mostly been like episode 1 was Next Generation, which is obviously just to call back to the show. Episode 2 is Disengage, and obviously Picard stings Engage. And they made a big deal in this when Riker lets him sit in the captain's chair, and the camera comes in and
music kicks in. Yeah. I like that Riker sits in the chair next to him, and he does the exact same sitting pose he always does in the show. That felt good.
Yeah, to be fair, I will say, if nothing else, the first 2 seasons did like. When I thought they wouldn't, they really stuck to their guns about not having Picard ever be the captain of the ship. Like, he was always just there, which was kind of a problem from a writing perspective, because he felt like he was just this useless old man who wasn't really contributing anything to anything that was going on for a lot of the show. But I suppose the idea the whole time was that when he eventually does like sit in the captain's chair and he's surrounded by mostly the crew of the Next Gen, he's not quite there yet, but we're getting there. It would feel like a bigger deal, and it relatively did, but yeah. So that said though, I'll stick to my guns though. Last week, Picard's like, "Hey Riker, be the captain. Call me number 1. I'm your number 1 now," and then didn't listen to undermined everything he said for the rest of the episode.
Couldn't do it. Kirk had that problem too.
So Riker said, "F it, I'm giving in. I'll go back to being number 1. It's where we all feel comfortable."
Well, we know that flying by the seat of your pants is Picard's specialty also.
That sounds like more of a Kirk thing to me, but yeah.
Well, the phrase maybe, but actually flying blind by the seat of your pants and the feel of the ship movement. That was Picard. He was a pilot.
Okay.
He did in one of the episodes. It might have been Farpoint when I think because the ships separate in Farpoint, and then he does no, maybe that wasn't it. Maybe it was an asteroid field. There's something where he sits on and does the piloting.
Sure, yeah. It does like a manual thing at some point, yeah.
Yeah.
In fact, I think
Farpoint was Riker.
No, Riker does that as well, yeah, in the first episode.
That was Riker. It was like, show your, prove yourself to me, and he gives all the commands for docking.
Yeah, remember how they introduced the fact that it could separate? They did it a second time halfway through season 1, and then they never did it again.
They do it in at least one movie.
Oh, do they? Okay, so they brought it back in a movie, but in the show, they conveniently just happily forgot about that.
Yeah, we even had a toy when I was a kid, like a model that the saucer section separated. But it was just annoying because you never saw the ship like that, so you never played with it that way, and you just kind of had to hold it at the part where it's separated to be able to use it.
I was a Power Rangers kid, so I had a lot of like the Zords, which would like combine and make things. This sounds like a really shit version of that, where all it does is just split into.
Yeah, I mean, it was metal and heavy, which was cool, but it was probably more of like a toy for adult nerds. Yeah. That I had taken.
You could kill a man with this saucer section.
Yeah. It's the battleship, though, part that would have been the killing part.
All right, I think that'll wrap us up. It was a good episode.
I'm tired, and I got a little bit of a buzz going.
You've been at the wine, the Chateau Picard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I got a bottle today.
All right.
It'll last me like a week, maybe more. I don't drink that much anymore. Although I've been drinking when we do these reviews. So everyone's going to think that I drink all the time.
That's fine. It can push you in good spirits. You're relaxed to sit and chat. That makes sense.
Yeah.
It's the atmosphere that one wants to cultivate in such a environment. Although, admittedly, last week was more like drowning your sorrows because the episode was so bad.
Yeah.
Glug, glug, glug,
I poured
glug.
this before I watched the episode, and then after I'm like, well, I poured this wine. I guess I should drink it.
All right. Well, that's the review. Thank you very much for joining us, everyone. Here's hoping the uptick in quality of the rating continues. I
love it. I love this episode. More, please.
Yes, continues boldly into the following episodes. So there you go.
Yeah.
That's us. Thank you very much once again for joining us. You can support all the content by going over to patreon.com/MailFuzzTV, and do check out our sci-fi movie podcast that me and Tara do. Weekly movie discussions. We've got like 170 episodes of that now. So go check out that. It's called the Atomic Cinema Experiment.
Sounds like we're reaching a milestone.
Yeah, we're going to do Back to the Future for episode 200, so look forward to that.
No, we're not.
yeah, we are. No,
we're not.
Yes, we are. We have
that
to
episode's cursed.
We have to do Back to the Future at some point. We can't.
We can't go back to time travel. We did all those time travel films.
Time travel's not written off forever. There's going to be new time travel movies.
When Back to the Future is relevant again, that's when we'll go back to it.
Plus, it's literally time travel. If there's one thing we can go back to whenever we want, it's time travel.
How dare you? I hated that. Edit that out.
No, I will not.
It.
I will not edit it out. That was an excellent joke. Thank you very much, everyone. This has been our review of the new Picard. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?
Look forward to episode 200, Birdemic.